Hephaestus explained, the lame god whose rage forged the fate of Olympus. Behold Olympus, a peak of impossible splendor, piercing the heavens, wreathed in clouds of gold and dawn. This is the throne of the gods, the heart of the cosmos, a realm of sublime perfection. Here dwell beings of breathtaking beauty, of unassailable power, of radiant immortality. Zeus, the king, whose laughter is thunder and whose frown is the storm. Hera, the queen, majestic and terrible in her jealousy. Apollo, the sun-kissed archer of perfect form. Aphrodite, the very essence of love and beauty, born of sea foam and desire. Perfection. It is the word that defines this celestial kingdom. Every column, every song, every face is a testament to an ideal, a divine standard far beyond the reach of mortals. But in this pantheon of the flawless, in this dazzling tapestry of divine light, there is one thread that is twisted, one note that is dissonant. He is a god, yes, an Olympian in his own right, yet he is the antithesis of their gleaming ideal. He is the outcast, the scorned, the broken. He is Hephaestus, the lame god. His story is not one of radiant glory, but of fire and shadow, of rejection and resentment. It is the tale of a god whose pain was a crucible, whose rage was a hammer, and whose creations born from the depths of his bitterness would not merely adorn Olympus, but would arm it, bind it, and ultimately forge its very fate. This is not the story of a minor god of the forge. This is the story of how the most broken of the immortals became the indispensable and terrifying architect of destiny. This is Hephaestus explained. Our saga begins where all power resides, on the celestial peak of Olympus. It is a realm spun from ambrosia and nectar, a kingdom of impossible beauty where the very air hums with divinity. Here, perfection is not an aspiration, it is the fundamental law of existence. The gods and goddesses who dwell here are flawless paragons of might and beauty. Zeus, the king, whose voice is the rolling thunder and whose gaze commands the firmament. Apollo, the golden archer, a vision of masculine grace. Artemis, his twin, the untouchable goddess of the moonlit hunt. And of course Hera, the queen of heaven, whose majesty is rivaled only by her fierce and unyielding pride. In this pantheon of the immaculate, pride is a currency more valuable than gold. And rivalry is the engine of divine drama. And it is from the crucible of this rivalry, from the wounded pride of the queen of all gods, that our story is born. The catalyst was not, as it so often was, one of Zeus's countless infidelities with a mortal or a nymph. No, the wound was deeper, more personal. It was an act of creation that rendered Hera entirely obsolete. Zeus, the mighty king, had suffered a headache of cosmic proportions. To relieve the pressure, he commanded a mighty axe to be brought down upon his own divine skull. From this astonishing wound there was no blood, no cry of pain. Instead, a new divinity sprang forth, fully grown, clad in gleaming armor, with a battle cry that shook the foundations of Olympus. This was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, of strategy, of heroic endeavor. She was the child of Zeus's mind alone, a testament to his singular power, born without the need of a mother. All of heaven erupted in awe. The gods marveled at this miracle, this perfect daughter born of the perfect father. Their praise echoed through the celestial halls. But one goddess did not marvel. Hera, the queen, the goddess of marriage and childbirth, did not rejoice. She watched, and a cold, venomous jealousy coiled in her heart. A child born without a mother? It was a profound impersonal insult. It was a declaration that she, the great mother of the gods, was unnecessary. The cheers for Athena were like daggers in her soul, each one a testament to her husband's power and her own perceived irrelevance. In the silent, seething chambers of her heart, a defiant resolution took form. A fire was lit. If Zeus could create a child from his own being, then so could she. She would answer his miracle with one of her own. She would bear a son of her substance alone, without the seed of Zeus. A son so glorious, so powerful, so magnificent, that he would outshine the newborn Athena and stand as the ultimate symbol of Hera's own creative might. He would be her champion, her vindication. She retreated from the court, pouring all her divine essence, all her frustrated ambition, and all her regal pride into a singular act of parthenogenesis. She willed a child into existence. She envisioned a son with the beauty of Apollo and the strength of Ares, a perfect prince for the queen of heaven. But creation fueled by bitterness rarely yields perfection. It is a poisoned wellspring. When the child was finally born, Hera looked upon him, and her vision of glory shattered into a million pieces. The infant that lay before her was not a radiant champion. He was small and shriveled. His face was contorted, red and screaming. And his legs were twisted and weak, bent at unnatural angles. In the Olympian realm of physical flawlessness, this child was a grotesque aberration. An imperfection. A failure. A wave of pure, unadulterated shame washed over the queen of the gods. This was not her vindication. This was a living, breathing monument to her failed ambition. This was a blemish on her immaculate reputation. In that moment, all maternal instinct was burned away by the acid of her wounded vanity. She saw not a son who needed her love, but a monster who would bring her ridicule. She could not bear the thought of the other gods seeing him, of their whispers, of their smug, pitying glances. And so Hera, queen of heaven, goddess of motherhood, committed an act of unspeakable cruelty. An act born of shame and pride. She took her newborn son, her own flesh and blood, the child she had willed into being, and with a heart of stone, she hurled him from the sacred, cloud-wreathed peak of Olympus. Imagine that fall. It was not a swift descent. The myths tell us it lasted for a full day and a full night. An eternity of screaming terror for a being only moments old. He spun through the brilliant blue of the sky, past the golden light of the sun, and into the velvet star-dusted blanket of the night. He was an exile before he had even learned his own name. He was broken by his own mother before he had ever taken a single step. Whether he was born lame, or whether the fall itself shattered his legs, the outcome remains the same. He was rejected. He was falling, and the vast, uncaring ocean rushed up to claim him. But the fates, the three ancient weavers of all destiny, had not spun such a short thread for this discarded godling. His life was not meant to end in the cold, watery abyss. His plummet was witnessed, not by the gods of Olympus, who remained ignorant or indifferent, but by two gentle divinities of the sea. Thetis, the silver-footed Nereid, a goddess of profound compassion who would one day be the mother of the great Achilles, and the Oceanid Eurynome. They saw the falling star, heard the faint, desperate cry. Moved by a pity that his own mother could not feel, they surged to the surface and caught the broken child in their arms just before he struck the waves. They looked upon his twisted limbs and his tear-streaked face, and they saw not a monster, but a life to be saved. A soul to be nurtured. They did not return him to the cruel heights of his birth. They took him to their own hidden sanctuary, a secret grotto nestled in the heart of the Aegean Sea, far from the cold, judgmental eyes of Olympus. Here in the quiet, shimmering depths, Hephaestus found the one thing his celestial home had denied him. He found refuge. He found acceptance. He found love. For 9 years he lived in this subterranean paradise. The rhythmic pulse of the ocean was his lullaby. The gentle currents were his cradle. The naiads and nereids were his playmates. He was safe. He was hidden. And here, in the heart of the earth, surrounded by rock and sea and pressure, he began to discover who he truly was. One day, exploring a volcanic vent on the seafloor, he felt an irresistible pull. A warmth. A power. He found raw metals in the rock, and in the heat of the vent, he saw them glow and soften. He felt an innate, primal connection. He picked up a lump of iron ore, and using a harder stone for a hammer and a flat rock for an anvil, he began to work. His hands, attached to a crippled body, moved with a grace and certainty that was utterly divine. The fire did not burn him, it felt like an extension of his own spirit. The metal did not resist him, it seemed to sing under his hammer, eager to be shaped. He was clumsy at first, but driven by an instinct he could not explain. And he forged his first creation. It was not a weapon. It was a brooch, a delicate, intricate pin of gleaming bronze, shaped like a spiraling seashell. He gave this small, beautiful thing to his saviors, Thetis and Eurynome. It was a token of his gratitude, his first act of deliberate creation. They marveled at its artistry, a beauty forged from the raw and the discarded, much like the boy himself. In that moment everything changed. In that secret, submarine forge, with the roar of the volcanic vents as his bellows and the clang of his stone hammer as his heartbeat, Hephaestus found his purpose. He was not an Olympian prince. He was not a radiant ideal. He was a maker, a craftsman, a smith. He poured all of his loneliness, all the remembered pain of his fall, and all of his burgeoning brilliant genius into the fire. He crafted wonders in the deep. Clockwork fish that swam on their own, necklaces of woven silver that captured the light of the water, delicate thrones of coral and pearl for his foster mothers. The rejected son was becoming a master. He was honing a skill that would one day make the heavens themselves bow. Hidden in the dark, his heart had become its own forge, and it was being stoked by the embers of a burning, deep, and very, very patient rage. His time was coming. 9 years is a fleeting moment in the timeless existence of an immortal. But for a god nursing a wound as deep as a fall from heaven, 9 years is an eternity. It is long enough for the sharp sting of rejection to fester into a chronic ache. Long enough for that ache to curdle into a cold, hard grudge. And long enough for that grudge to be hammered and honed on the anvil of a brilliant mind into a singular, gleaming purpose, revenge. In his watery exile, cloistered in the heart of the sea, Hephaestus was not entirely cut off from the world above. Whispers and tales, carried on the currents and shared by passing sea deities, reached his ears. Tales of Olympus. Tales of its splendor, its politics, its power. And tales of his mother, Hera. He would hear her name and envision her in his mind's eye, the proud, majestic queen, seated upon her throne, resplendent in her glory, radiating an authority that had deemed him unworthy. The mother who had looked upon his infant form and felt only shame. The pain of that memory had not faded with time. It had been transmuted. Every clang of his hammer, every roar of his bellows, was an act of alchemy, transforming his sorrow and rage into skill. And now that skill was to become a weapon. But his would not be a revenge of brute force, like that of his brutish, warmongering half-brother, Ares. Hephaestus's revenge would be a masterpiece of cunning. It would be an object of sublime beauty, of irresistible desire. It would be a trap forged from vanity itself. He would use his greatest gift, his craft, to ensnare his mother, to make her a prisoner of her own notorious pride. He began his magnum opus. He summoned the finest materials the earth could offer, gold that shone with the brilliance of the sun, silver that gleamed with the soft light of the moon, and precious gems that held the fire of distant stars within their facets. He labored day and night, his face illuminated by the forge fire, his expression a mixture of profound concentration and cold fury. The rhythmic ringing of his hammer was no longer just the sound of creation, it was a drumbeat counting down to a long-awaited reckoning. Into this creation he poured everything. All his peerless skill, all his meticulous ingenuity, and all the distilled bitterness of 9 years of exile. He was building a throne. But it was no ordinary throne. It was the most magnificent chair ever conceived by god or mortal. Its golden back rose high, carved with images of peacocks and lilies, Hera's sacred symbols. Its arms were sculpted into graceful swans that seemed to beckon the weary to sit. The cushions were woven from the finest celestial silks, promising a comfort beyond imagining. Every inch of its surface was a testament to a genius that Olympus in its arrogance had cast away. But this beauty was a facade. Hidden within its sublime architecture, Hephaestus wove his true purpose. With painstaking care he forged chains of adamantine, the hardest substance in the cosmos. But these were no crude, heavy bonds. They were spun into threads as fine as a spider's silk, utterly invisible to the naked eye, and woven seamlessly into the very structure of the throne. They were connected to a cunning internal mechanism, a trigger that would respond to the weight and warmth of a body. It was a gilded cage, a work of art and an instrument of exquisite, patient vengeance. When his work was complete, he sent it as a gift, an anonymous offering from the depths delivered to the gates of Olympus. A present for the Queen of Heaven, a token from a long-lost son seeking to honor the mother who had thrown him away. Its arrival on Olympus caused an immediate sensation. The gods, beings accustomed to beauty, were stunned into silence. None had ever laid eyes upon such breathtaking craftsmanship. The throne seemed to possess a life of its own, radiating an aura of power and luxury that made even Zeus's own throne seem mundane. Hera was more than stunned, she was ecstatic. Her pride swelled. She saw this magnificent gift not as a peace offering from a son she had wronged, but as her rightful due. Finally, a throne that truly reflected her own estimation of her glory. It was a validation of her status, a treasure worthy of her name. Ignoring the quiet words of caution from a few of the more discerning gods, she swept forward, her robes flowing behind her, a triumphant smile on her face. With a sigh of pure satisfaction, she seated herself upon the golden masterpiece. The comfort was absolute, the feeling of power immense. She was the very image of divine authority. And then the moment of triumph passed. She prepared to rise and address the court, and she could not move. The trap had been sprung. With the faint, almost inaudible click, the invisible chains had shot forth from the arms, the back, the seat of the throne. They wrapped around her wrists, her waist, her ankles, binding her as securely as if she had been chained to a mountain. She was trapped, the Queen of Heaven, a prisoner in her own glorious new chair. Her smile faltered, replaced by confusion, then by a flicker of irritation, and finally by the cold dread of panic. She pushed. She strained. The gossamer bonds held her fast, unyielding and unbreakable. Panic erupted in the hall of the gods. Zeus, his face darkening like a storm cloud, roared in fury. The other Olympians rushed forward, attempting to free their queen. Ares, the impulsive god of war, drew his massive bronze sword and swung it with all his might against the arm of the throne. His blade, which could cleave mountains, shattered into 1,000 pieces against the enchanted gold, not leaving so much as a scratch. Apollo, the god of light, focused his divine power upon the chair, hoping to dissolve the bonds with pure energy, but the magic woven by Hephaestus was of a different order. It was a primal magic, the unassailable logic of the earth, of fire, of meticulous engineering. It would not yield to mere will. They were utterly and completely helpless. The most powerful beings in the known universe, thwarted by a piece of furniture. A profound, stinging humiliation settled over Olympus. And with it, a dawning, terrible realization. There was only one being in all of creation who could understand the mechanism of this trap. There was only one who held the key. To free their queen, they had to appeal to the one they had so willingly forgotten. They had to summon Hephaestus. Messengers were dispatched. They found Hephaestus in his forge, calmly hammering a piece of silver, pretending to be surprised by their arrival. They begged him, implored him to come to Olympus and release his mother. Hephaestus simply looked at them, his eyes cold. "I have no mother," was his flat, dismissive reply. He turned back to his anvil, enjoying every second of their desperation. He let Hera sit there, a prisoner on display, stewing in a rage and humiliation of her own making. The queen of the gods had become a public spectacle, and he was the unseen director of the show. Enraged by this defiance, Ares, ever the advocate for violence, boasted that he would descend and drag his insolent half-brother back to Olympus by force. He stormed down to the forge, expecting to find a cowering cripple who would yield to his warrior's might. He found instead a master in his own domain. Hephaestus was no brawler, but his forge was his fortress, and his tools were his arsenal. He met the charging god of war not with a sword, but with a volley of animated, clanking metal automatons. He blasted Ares with jets of scorching fire from his bellows and trapped his feet with sudden snares of molten metal. Ares, screaming in pain and surprise, burned and humiliated, fled back to Olympus in utter disgrace. The god of mindless war was no match for the god of intelligent design. Force had failed. Humiliation had failed. The gods were at an impasse. And so they turned to a different tactic. If they could not compel him, perhaps they could persuade him. Or failing that, inebriate him. They sent Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and madness. Dionysus, himself a relative newcomer and something of an outsider on Olympus, understood the heart of the rejected. He did not arrive with commands or threats. He arrived with a warm smile and a skin filled with his finest, most potent wine. He sat with Hephaestus, not as a messenger from a king, but as a potential friend. He offered a drink. He listened, truly listened, as Hephaestus poured out the long-suppressed story of his pain. Dionysus acknowledged the profound injustice, validated the smith's anger, and praised the sheer genius of his revenge. And all the while, the wine flowed. It was a wine of forgetting, a wine of laughter. It warmed Hephaestus's bitter heart, softening the hard edges of his rage. Dionysus spoke of Olympus not as a place of judgment, but as a place of endless feasting and revelry, a place that was incomplete without a craftsman of Hephaestus's caliber. Drunk, laughing, and finally persuaded by Dionysus's charm, Hephaestus agreed. He would return. He would free his mother. But he would not go back as a supplicant. He would not limp back in shame. He would return in triumph. And so Hephaestus made his grand re-entrance to Olympus. Not walking but riding a drunken king on a donkey leading a riotous parade. The stoic gods watched in stunned silence as the lame outcast they had scorned returned not as a beggar, but as a conquering hero. He held all the cards. He had brought the entire pantheon to its knees with his mind in his hands. He swaggered to the golden throne and with a theatrical flourish, touched a hidden release. The invisible bonds dissolved. Hera was free, though her pride was wounded forever. In that moment, Hephaestus secured his place. Not through birthright, which had been denied him. Not through beauty which he lacked. But through sheer, undeniable and indispensable genius. He had faced his tormentor and won. His fall from heaven was now answered by a triumphant, defiant return. Hephaestus had won. By an act of breathtaking ingenuity and audacious spite, he had secured his place in the celestial court. He was no longer the forgotten child in the depths of the sea, but a recognized power, an Olympian whose skill could humble the Queen of Heaven herself. The price of his mother's freedom was his own permanent reinstatement. He had returned not as a pariah but as a prince. But a victory of such magnitude demands a victor's spoils. Hephaestus, emboldened by his success and still nursing the deep wounds of a lifetime of being deemed unworthy, made a demand. It was a demand so audacious, so contrary to the natural order of Olympus, that it left the other gods speechless. He demanded a wife. And not just any goddess. Not a minor nymph or titaness of lesser standing. He demanded the ultimate prize. The symbol of everything he was not. He demanded the hand of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. The reasons for this demand are debated by the chroniclers of myth. Was it a desperate attempt to heal the wounds of his own ugliness by possessing the embodiment of beauty? Did he believe that her perfection could somehow complete his own brokenness? Or was it the ultimate power play for the cosmic underdog to claim the prize that every other god coveted? A more cynical tradition holds that it was Zeus himself who decreed the marriage. The king of the gods, ever the political strategist, may have seen it as a cruel but effective solution to two problems. It would reward Hephaestus for his service, and it would bind the wild, passionate, and often troublesome Aphrodite to a stable, industrious, and most importantly undesirable husband, thus curbing the chaos she so often sowed among the gods. Whatever the logic, the cosmic decree was made. The lame god, the soot-stained smith, the most physically imperfect of the immortals, was to be wed to the golden goddess, the foam-born vision of love herself. It was a marriage forged not in passion but in politics. A union bound not by affection, but by irony and obligation. And from its very inception, it was destined for tragedy. For all his bitterness and rage, Hephaestus possessed a surprisingly devoted heart. He adored Aphrodite with the desperate, all-consuming passion of a man who cannot believe his fortune. He saw past her divine vanity and loved the ideal she represented. And he tried to win her affection in the only way he knew how, through his craft. He became her personal artisan, her divine jeweler, her tireless builder. He poured his heart into his forge, not for revenge, but for love. He built for her a palace on Olympus, a marvel of gleaming bronze and silver, with animated golden handmaidens who attended to her every need. He forged for her necklaces that shimmered like captured starlight, bracelets that sang with a faint, magical chime, and earrings that dripped with dewdrops of diamond. His greatest gift to her was the cestus hemas, a magical girdle, an enchanted belt woven from threads of irresistible desire. It was a masterpiece of erotic magic, capable of making its wearer the object of overwhelming passion for any who looked upon her. He gave her everything his genius could produce. He laid at her feet a treasure trove of wonders, hoping that the beauty his hands could make would somehow, someday, make him beautiful in her eyes. But Aphrodite felt nothing but contempt. She was the embodiment of effortless, natural beauty. He was the god of hard, grueling labor. She was passion, grace, and spontaneous desire. He was diligent, soot-stained, and his uneven limping gait was a constant, grating reminder of imperfection in her perfect world. His tireless devotion felt less like love and more like a chain. His adoration was a chore, his presence an embarrassment. Her heart, which was as wild and untamable as the sea from which she was born, could not be won with gifts. Craved passion, not possession. It yearned for the thrill of a handsome warrior, not the steady devotion of a crippled craftsman. And she found that passion in the arms of the one god who was Hephaestus's complete and total opposite. His own half-brother, the handsome, arrogant, and virile god of war, Ares. Their affair became the worst-kept secret on Olympus. While Hephaestus, the dutiful husband, labored in his volcanic workshop, believing his work would please his wife, Ares and Aphrodite mocked their union. They saw his diligence as a convenient cover for their trysts. The laughter of the other gods, who knew of the affair, became a quiet chorus of ridicule behind his back. The deception could not last forever. For there is one god who sees all that transpires in the world of light. Helios, the god of the sun, who drives his fiery chariot across the sky each day, witnessed their secret meetings from his celestial vantage point. He saw Ares sneak into Hephaestus's home. He saw the betrayal unfold. Taking pity on the honest, hard-working smith, or perhaps simply offended by the blatant disrespect, Helios descended to the forge of Mount Etna. He found Hephaestus at his anvil and told him the truth. The news struck Hephaestus with the force of his own sledgehammer. It was a humiliation that dwarfed all others. His mother's rejection had been a wound to his form, a judgment on his body. This was a wound to his very soul, a rejection of his heart, his love, his devotion. The pain was immense, an agony that threatened to consume him. But as before, his pain did not dissolve into tears. It did not erupt in a mindless, screaming rage. It crystallized. It became cold, sharp, and terrifyingly focused. He would not confront them directly. He would not challenge the mighty god of war to a foolish duel. He would do what he always did. He would think. He would design. He would build a trap. He returned to his work, but his purpose had changed. His face became an unreadable mask of cold fury. He calmly announced to Aphrodite and the other gods that he was taking a long overdue journey to the Isle of Lemnos, his favorite mortal haunt, a place where he was worshipped. It was a carefully constructed lie. As soon as his wife and her lover believed him to be gone, he doubled back, creeping silently into his own workshop on Olympus. And there, in the dead of night, he began his second great work of vengeance. He worked not with heavy bronze or gold, but with metal spun into threads so fine they were nearly invisible. He was weaving a net. It was not a coarse, heavy net for catching fish. It was a web of gossamer chains as light as air, as soft as silk, yet imbued with the magical strength of adamantine, making it utterly unbreakable. It was a marvel of subtle, devastating engineering. He draped this invisible net over his own marriage bed, attaching it to a series of impossibly sensitive triggers woven into the bedsheets. It was a trap set with the patience of a spider. Then he made a show of his departure, ensuring all of Olympus saw him leave. As Hephaestus had predicted, Ares wasted no time. Believing the husband to be far away, the god of war swaggered into Hephaestus's home and into Hephaestus's bed, into the arms of the goddess of love. But the moment their bodies pressed against the sheets, the trap was sprung. The invisible net fell. It dropped from the canopy above, enveloping them in an instant. They were caught, tangled together in their naked embrace, ensnared in an unbreakable web of shimmering metallic thread. They struggled, they thrashed, but their panic only served to tighten the gossamer bonds. They were utterly, completely, and humiliatingly trapped. But for Hephaestus, catching them was not enough. Their private shame had to become public humiliation. He strode back into his palace, his limp now a defiant stomp. He threw open the doors to his bedchamber and bellowed, his voice echoing through the halls of Olympus, summoning all the other gods to come and bear witness. And they came. They crowded into the room, their eyes wide. They saw the mighty god of war and the sublime goddess of love, helplessly entwined, their infidelity exposed for all to see. Hephaestus expected outrage on his behalf. He expected condemnation for the adulterers. He expected justice. Instead, the gods began to laugh. It started as a chuckle from Apollo, who nudged the grinning Hermes. "Tell me," Apollo snickered, "would you be afraid of such a strong net? Would you trade places with Ares?" Hermes, the trickster god, roared with laughter. "By the sticks," he cried. "I would gladly be bound by 3 nets as strong as this one if only I could lie beside the golden Aphrodite." Their laughter filled the chamber, a sound far more painful to Hephaestus than any blow. They were not laughing at the adulterers, they were laughing at the entire pathetic spectacle. They were laughing at him. In exposing his wife's betrayal, he had also laid bare his own cuckoldry for the entire cosmos to mock. His moment of ultimate triumph had soured into his moment of most profound shame. Only Poseidon, the stern god of the sea, did not join the laughter. Perhaps remembering the boy he had helped rescue, he felt a measure of sympathy. He approached Hephaestus and spoke quietly, promising that he would personally guarantee that Ares paid the cuckold's fine, a monetary settlement for the transgression. His rage finally spent, his heart hollowed out by the mockery, Hephaestus agreed. He released the lovers. Ares, freed from the net, fled Olympus in shame, not to be seen for some time. Aphrodite, mortified but unrepentant, retreated to her temple on Cyprus. The marriage was shattered. Hephaestus had won his revenge, but in the end he had lost everything. He was left alone once more, returning to the only place that offered him solace, his forge. He had proven he could trap his enemies, but he had learned he could never forge the one thing he truly desired: genuine love and respect. This bitter failure would cement his isolation, a final, painful lesson that would turn him away from the fickle dramas of the heart, and toward the grander, more consequential work that awaited him: the arming of the gods and the forging of ages. Having endured the primal rejection of his mother and the galling infidelity of his wife, Hephaestus made a profound retreat. Not into exile but into his element. He turned his back on the fickle passions and petty politics of the Olympian court and descended into the one realm where he was not judged, not mocked, but revered as an undisputed king, his forge. He may have been a failure in the golden halls of power, but here, in the roaring, incandescent heart of the world, he was supreme. The gods, in their sublime arrogance, might laugh at his limp and whisper about his failed marriage. But their laughter always died when the winds of war began to blow. When a new and terrible monster threatened their reign. When a cosmic conflict loomed on the horizon. When a tool of unimaginable power was required to assert their dominion. Their gilded sandals always led them to the same fiery door. They came to Etna not as peers, but as supplicants. They came to the lame god, their hats in their hands, for he alone could forge the instruments of their survival and their glory. It was here, in this crucible of creation, that the nature of his work transformed. His rage, once a hot personal fire aimed at his mother and his wife, now cooled into something far more potent. It became the controlled, enduring flame of the master craftsman, a fuel that he would use to forge the very artifacts of destiny. He was no longer just a maker of beautiful things or traps for the unfaithful. He became the architect of power, the armorer of the gods, the smith of fate itself. Consider the very symbols of Olympian authority, the icons of their power known throughout the ages. These were not simply born of their divine will. They were conceived in the mind and hammered into existence on the anvil of Hephaestus. For his father, Zeus, the mighty king who had allowed him to be cast out, Hephaestus forged his most terrible instrument of power, the aegis. It was not merely a shield. It was a breastplate, a cape of impenetrable goat hide, fringed with living, writhing snakes that hissed and struck at his enemies. And at its center he mounted the most terrifying weapon of all, the severed head of the Gorgon, Medusa, whose gaze could turn any living creature to stone. To behold the aegis in the hands of Zeus was to be paralyzed with a primal, soul-shattering terror. It was the ultimate symbol of divine authority, the instrument Zeus used to rout the Titans and command unwavering obedience from gods and mortals alike. The absolute power of the king of the gods was, in a very real sense, a power designed and delivered by his unwanted son. For his uncle, Poseidon, the stern and moody lord of the seas, Hephaestus forged the trident. 3 prongs of celestial bronze, each one perfectly balanced, humming with the power of the abyss. This was no simple fishing spear. It was a tool of geological force. With a single strike, Poseidon could shake the foundations of the earth, summoning earthquakes that shattered coastlines. With a wave of its prongs he could churn the placid sea into a maelstrom of ships swallowing whirlpools and towering tsunamis. The power to raise new islands from the depths or drown entire armies in a tidal wave rested in a weapon that came from Hephaestus's fire. And for the third great brother, Hades, the grim and silent ruler of the underworld, he fashioned an artifact of a different kind of power. He forged the helm of darkness, the cap of invisibility. It was a helmet crafted from the shadows themselves, a crown that bent light and sound around its wearer, rendering them utterly unseen, unheard, and undetectable. It was with this helm that the gods moved unseen among their enemies during the great Titanomachy. It was with this helm that heroes like Perseus could approach their monstrous quarry without being perceived. It was an artifact of stealth, of terror, of the unseen hand that strikes from nowhere. A gift from the god of the bright, roaring fire to the king of endless silent night. He armed the great triad, but his work did not stop there. For Apollo, the radiant god of music and prophecy, he forged a bow of pure silver and a quiver of golden arrows. These shafts flew with unerring accuracy, capable of delivering a swift, painless death, or, when Hephaestus willed it, carrying a virulent plague that could decimate entire cities as they did to the Greek camp at Troy. For Apollo's twin sister, Artemis, the chase goddess of the hunt, he forged a matching bow of silver and arrows that shone with the light of the moon, ensuring she would never miss her mark in the wild. The very instruments of divine justice, of pestilence, and of the hunt all bore the maker's mark of Hephaestus. His forge, however, was not just the source of divine weapons. Its influence would reach down into the world of mortals and decisively shape the course of the greatest conflict of the heroic age, the Trojan War. One day, a visitor came to his forge. It was Thetis, his foster mother, the one who had caught him from the sky and sheltered him in the sea. She came not with a demand, but with a desperate plea. Her mortal son, the great warrior Achilles, was fated to die at Troy if he fought without divine armor. She begged Hephaestus, for the sake of the love she had once shown him, to craft a set of armor for her son. Hephaestus looked upon the goddess who had saved him, and his heart, so often hardened by bitterness, softened. He did not hesitate. For the greatest of mortal warriors, the son of the woman who had shown him kindness, he would create his ultimate masterpiece. He worked for a day and a night, his hammer ringing in a furious symphony of creation. The armor he forged was flawless, but it was the shield that was a true wonder of the world. It was more than a mere piece of defense. It was a microcosm of all existence, a story told in metal. Upon its 5 layers of bronze, tin, silver, and gold, Hephaestus wrought the universe. He depicted the earth, the sky, and the sea, the tireless sun, the full moon, and all the constellations that crown the heavens. He forged upon it 2 cities of mortal men. One was a city at peace. In it, there were weddings and feasts, music and dancing. In its marketplace, judges were dispensing justice over a dispute. The other was a city at war. Its walls were besieged by 2 glittering armies. He depicted an ambush in a field, a bloody battle by a river, and the fates themselves dragging the dead from the field of combat. He forged a soft, rich field being plowed for the 3rd time. He forged a king's estate at harvest time, with reapers cutting the grain and servants preparing a feast under an oak tree. He forged a vineyard, heavy with succulent purple grapes, and a herd of straight-horned cattle being attacked by 2 savage lions, with herdsmen and dogs rushing to fight them off. And finally, on the outer rim, he wrought a dancing floor, where young men and women moved in joyous, intricate patterns. He encircled this entire world of life and death, of peace and war, with the great world-encircling river Oceanus. When Achilles donned this armor, he carried with him not just the protection of a god, but a reflection of the entire mortal world he was fighting to both defend and destroy. This divine panoply made him nearly invincible, a whirlwind of death on the Trojan plain. It drove the narrative of the war, sealing the fate of the great hero Hector, and ultimately, the city of Troy itself. A decade-long war between the greatest kingdoms of men was decided by the work of the lame god. Yet, perhaps the most consequential, and most terrifying creation to ever emerge from his forge was not a weapon. It was not a shield or a throne. It was a woman. After the Titan Prometheus defied the gods and gifted fire and knowledge to the fledgling human race, Zeus burned with a cold, vengeful fury. He devised a punishment, not for the Titan alone, but for the mortals who had benefited from this divine theft. He conceived of a gift for humanity, a being of exquisite beauty on the outside that would carry a universe of misery within. To bring this cruel vision to life, he turned, as he always did, to his master craftsman. He commanded Hephaestus to take clay and water and mold a virgin in the likeness of the immortal goddesses. With a heavy heart, bound by the unbreakable will of his king, Hephaestus obeyed. His hands, which had shaped the mightiest weapons, now sculpted the delicate form of the first mortal woman. He gave her the shape of a goddess in a face of heartbreaking beauty. Athena then breathed life into the clay figure and dressed her in shimmering silver robes. Aphrodite, his own unfaithful wife, bestowed upon her irresistible grace and the power of agonizing desire. Hermes, the trickster, gifted her with a cunning, deceitful mind and a shameless, curious heart. They named her Pandora, the all-gifted. And as a wedding present, Zeus gave her one final thing, a sealed pithos, a large storage jar, which she was strictly forbidden from ever opening. Hephaestus, the maker, had crafted the beautiful vessel for humanity's doom. Pandora was sent to the world of men, and her divinely gifted curiosity gnawed at her until she could resist no longer. She opened the jar. From it swarmed all the evils that had been locked away from the world. Sickness, death, sorrow, pain, poverty, war, and every form of misery and suffering. They flew out into the world like a plague of invisible insects, forever ending the golden age of man. Only one thing remained behind, fluttering weakly at the lip of the jar before Pandora sealed it again: hope. A faint, flickering consolation in a world now filled with darkness. Think of the devastating irony. Hephaestus, the scorned outcast, the sympathetic figure, became the direct instrument through which all evil was unleashed upon the human race. His hands, which had forged the aegis of Zeus and the shield of Achilles, also sculpted the beautiful damnation of all mortals. He was not a malevolent god, but his inescapable talent, his peerless genius, made him the perfect tool for the vengeful will of others. His creations were no longer just shaping the fate of Olympus. They were now forging the very nature of human existence itself. And so we arrive at the very heart of the matter, at the smoldering core of the paradox that is Hephaestus. His entire existence is a study in contradictions, a myth woven from opposing threads. He is the ugliest of the gods, yet he is the sole creator of the most sublime and perfect beauty. He is the outcast, hurled from the heights of Olympus, yet Olympus itself cannot function, cannot defend itself, cannot be itself without him. He is the eternal victim of the gods' cruelty and vanity, yet he is the indispensable agent of their power, the architect of their greatest glories and their most terrible vengeances. His story is not just a biography of a deity, it is a profound and timeless commentary on the true nature of worth, the source of power, and the complex morality of creation itself. Hephaestus represents the essential outsider, the indispensable pariah. In the glittering, aristocratic society of the Olympians, a society obsessed with physical perfection, noble lineage, and effortless grace, is the divine laborer, the blue-collar god, the celestial engineer. They marvel at his work, but they are uncomfortable with the worker. They covet his creations, but they do not want him at their feasts, his soot-stained presence a jarring reminder of the toil that underpins their luxury. They respect what his hands can produce, but they do not respect the god himself. He is the engine of Olympus, hidden away in the fiery, noisy, and dirty basement, while the rest of the pantheon enjoys the splendor of the main halls, blissfully unaware of the sweat and fire that makes their world possible. This dynamic reveals a fundamental truth about his power. It is not the inherited, intrinsic power of Zeus, who commands the sky by right of birth. It is not the natural elemental force of Poseidon, who is one with the sea. Hephaestus's power is different. It is a power that is earned. It is the power of knowledge, of skill, of relentless backbreaking work. It is the power of understanding the secret language of fire and earth, of knowing how to transmute the raw, the ugly, and the chaotic into the refined, the beautiful, and the mighty. In this, Hephaestus transcends his ancient origins. He is not merely a patron of blacksmiths. He is the patron deity of all artisans, all inventors, all engineers and scientists. He is the god of technology. He embodies humanity's own restless drive to build, to create, to understand the fundamental laws of the universe and bend them to our will. He represents the power of the mind and the hands to shape our environment, to solve our problems, and to forge our own destiny from the raw materials of the world around us. And like technology itself, his creations are fundamentally terrifyingly neutral. They are tools. An axe can be used to build a home or to take a life. Nuclear fission can power a city or destroy it. The artifacts that spring from his forge are imbued with immense power, but they possess no inherent morality. Their capacity for good or evil is determined entirely by the hands that wield them and the hearts that give them purpose. The very same hands that forged a shield to save the life of a hero also sculpted the woman who would unleash untold suffering upon all of humanity. The same fire that tempered the trident that commands the oceans could also be used to forge the invisible chains of a petty, vengeful trap. Hephaestus is the ultimate craftsman, the supreme maker, but he is rarely the master of his creation's final purpose. That power, that moral responsibility, lies with the kings and queens, the warriors and lovers, the gods and heroes who use what he has made. He provides the means, they provide the will. And so we circle back to the beginning, to his rage. The burning rage of the rejected son, the scorned husband, the mocked outsider. That rage was the catalyst. It was the primal energy that fueled his forge in those early years. But over time, that rage was transformed. It became the focused heat that allowed him to arm the pantheon, to define their iconography, to forge the weapons that would win their wars, the chains that would bind their enemies, and the tools that would enact their will upon the cosmos. The lame god, working in the shadows and the fire, did not merely influence the fate of Olympus. He hammered it into shape on his anvil. He built the stage, he crafted the props, and he forged the weapons for the grand, bloody, and glorious drama of Greek mythology. He never found the true love he craved from Aphrodite. He never gained the easy, unconditional acceptance of his Olympian peers. He was and always would be the outsider. But in the end, Hephaestus, the broken god, the lame craftsman, achieved a different, perhaps more enduring, form of immortality. While other gods are remembered for their fickle passions, their jealousies, and their wars, Hephaestus is remembered for what he made. His legacy is not written in the annals of love or politics, but it is forged in celestial bronze and adamant. It is written in the lightning bolt of Zeus, the trident of Poseidon, the shield of Achilles, and the unbreakable chains of Prometheus. He stands as a timeless and powerful testament to a profound truth. That true world-changing power does not always come from inherited perfection or flawless beauty. Sometimes it comes from the crucible of suffering. It is forged in the fires of rejection, and hammered into existence by the relentless, creative struggle of a broken heart. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the fiery heart of Olympus and the complex legacy of its most misunderstood god. The story of Hephaestus reminds us that even in a world of perfection, it is often the flawed and the forgotten who hold the true power to shape destiny. If you found this exploration of mythology compelling, please consider showing your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. And let us know in the comments below which god, hero, or monster story would you like us to explain next. Until next time, may your own forges burn bright.